To everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Julia. I am structural engineer at CREE and have again the honor of being the moderator of one of our CREE talks. This is our fourth CREE talk. Just very briefly, for those of you who do not know CREE. CREE is a global construction collective delivering systemized timber hybrid buildings in local markets. We are orchestrating in Europe, Asia, and in the United States. As part of our 10th year anniversary, this CREE talk is dedicated to the topic timber hybrid systems. In the panel today, we have two members of Edge Technologies and two members of CREE Buildings. Edge Technologies is the developer of one of the most recent CREE buildings, the prestigious Edge Suedkreuz project in Berlin with about 30,000 square meter GFA. Today, we will discuss about the possibilities and challenges in planning and building with timber hybrid and how a timber hybrid system influences the process in terms of costs, quality, and scheduling. And without any further explanation, I welcome all the guests that have registered today. Thank you for joining us. One thing that I wanted to mention before continuing is that this session is being recorded and will be made available to all of you afterwards. There's a chat available, so everyone who has a question is welcome to post it there. We will try the best possible to answer the questions during the talk. Otherwise, we're going to answer them towards the end of today's session. Before we start with the discussion, I would like to introduce all of the panelists in more depth and would therefore also like to welcome our speakers. And I would like to start with Martinrodeck, Executive Managing Director at Edge Technologies. Martin, could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Julia, thanks. Usually it's ladies first, of course, but Anya and I pre-discussed that I start. Hey, I'm Martinrodeck. I'm running the business of Edge in Germany since 2014. We're a developer, we're an office developer. We develop buildings currently in Berlin and in Hamburg. Gross pipeline is €1 billion. 2 projects in Hamburg in the Hafen City and 2 projects currently in Berlin and in that the Edge Suedkreuz, and this is what we're going to discuss today. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Happy to have you in the panel today. Now I'd like to bring up our next guest, which is Anya Borghart, Senior Development Manager at Edge Technologies. Anya, as well, could you please introduce yourself in a few words?
Yes, thank you, Julia. I'm an architect. I've worked as an architect for a couple of years and then became a project developer. I've been with Edge Technologies for 5 years now on the project Edge Suedkreuz. And I can say I'm driven by lots of curiosity, lots of impulses for innovation, and also a little bit, or in a big sense actually, by the big danger we have right now for the climate crisis. So I'm very happy to work for Edge and to be able to develop sustainable buildings.
Thank you. Looking forward to the discussion with you. Now I would like to say hello to my colleague Michael Kamenik, lead architect at CREE Buildings. Michael, could you please also introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Julia. I'm working for approximately 5 years now for CREE, as you said, as a lead architect and also as a partner coordinator and as a team lead of the partner coordination. And I'm really happy to be here today and to get a little bit more input into what it means to build in a sustainable and systemized way. And I also collected some experience regarding systemized building in my former work at Goldbeck Romberg, which is the, the Austrian way how to build with Goldbeck in Austria. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you here. And last but not least, I would like to welcome our fourth panelist, Rainer Strauch, CTO and Managing Director at CREE Buildings. Again, Rainer, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our guests?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Julia. So I'm a construction engineer. I work in that business for like about 25 years now. Many years I spent in conventional construction with large German general contractors. And then I joined the Austrian company of Romberg. Back then in 2009, I joined the Lifecycle Tower Research Project. I co-developed the system that we now implement in many buildings all over the planet. So now, in the meantime, I became the managing director. I oversee all technical and operational agendas worldwide for the CREE headquarters here in Dornbirn in Austria. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Rainer. Thank you all. I am really looking forward to the discussion and to the audience. The reason of this very panel coming together today is the, as I already mentioned, prestigious project Edge Suedkreuz in Berlin. So the project is an ensemble of 2 buildings in modular timber concrete composite construction. The first building is the MK1, and you should see a rendering from the top. So on the left-hand side, it's the MK1. It's rectangular and pretty much optimal for a building system. On the right-hand side, the MK2 is a trapezoidal-shaped atrium building and leads to more challenges when it comes to a building system. The project is designed as open ecosystem with nature-based architectural elements, such as the tree elements in the atrium of MK2 that you should see now. And yeah, with the design of the project, Edge wanted to realize the possibility for the so-called Office 4.0, which requires very flexible interior layout possibilities. Office 4.0 is a concept which is supported by many national and international studies. It means flexible working models, shared desk usage, creation of communication and collaboration areas, areas for more private retreats, for focused work, and all of this combined with lounges and cafes. That is a brief overview of the project, and that leads me to my first question, which is going to Edge Technology, so Anya and Martin. For the project, you considered several construction solutions. Why did you eventually decide for timber hybrid, and what other solutions have there been?
So maybe I can answer this one, Martin. Our first ambition actually was to use an intelligent and modular construction. So we didn't think about wood yet, but we wanted to secure a high quality building elements by prefabricating them. We also wanted to reduce the noise on the construction site and the dust pollution, because we are building in an urban neighborhood. So we had a lot of, we saw a lot of advantages in the prefabrication. And while we were collecting information about modular systems with reinforced concrete, actually, we somehow encountered the CREE system, and we became curious. And Edge has always been known for putting a lot of effort in creating the most sustainable buildings in the world. So we were open for innovation, and we had realized at a very early stage, long before COVID, that the well-being in a building was a very important part. So it was kind of logical that the thought of building Edge Suedkreuz in wood had a strong impact on us and on our team, and also on the management of Edge. So the early careful thoughts became a strong idea, and then they became a serious planning, and now they have become reality. So that was kind of the story how we came to the idea of building with wood.
And maybe briefly to add, I met a guy called Hubert Romberg a couple of years ago in Dornbirn, where Romberg had already constructed the LCT tower, and I was deeply impressed of the quality and of the ability to build commercial high-rise building. Not sure about the real height, but it was not just a couple of stories, 60 meter, I think, maybe higher. And that was somewhere in the back of my head. And when that idea came from the team, I said, hey, maybe it helps. I know the guy, I know the company. I've been there, visited him, his family. So I trust in their ability to innovate and also to execute, because that one thing is great, but the other is more important at the end. And so that came together.
Very interesting. Thank you. Did you work on a couple of solutions in parallel, or once the CREE system came up, you directly decided for it?
No, we actually did plan on 2 systems in parallel for the first 3 months. And we realized that we couldn't carry on much longer with this, because it meant for the teams, not only for us, but also for the architect, the structural engineers, the mechanical engineers, it meant that they needed either 2 teams, or they had to do the first planning and then the second planning, but we had a time scale. So it was quite a challenge to plan it, to do the parallel planning of the wooden hybrid and the reinforced concrete building.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can I ask you something that puzzled me back then, because I was also involved in the first month of the development, and I was always wondering why you're doing this. Can you say a bit more about the motivation? Because there was certainly a very fundamental motivation in that. So maybe it's good for everyone to know about that.
Well, the point was, sorry,
go on.
The point was that we didn't know how the market would accept the wooden hybrid building. We didn't know how the final investor would rate this building, how the new questions that came up with a wooden hybrid building would be answered by an investor and would be rated. So we had to give him the chance to see both plannings, and in the end he made, or like the end investor made the decision. We asked him, which one would you like us or prefer us to build, and he decided for wood.
Yeah, at least maybe to specify there, I think the decision is ours, but if a investor that was already at the table, and that's important to understand, we were not in the free space, because then the decision would have been clear. We work for a company, or we are a company with a very ambitious and motivated and intrinsically, innovative shareholder who really pushes the boundaries prior to every project and within every project, basically after each project, looking back and saying, okay, what went well and what went wrong, and why, did we turn left or right? At that moment in time, we hadn't signed anything, but it was clear that we really have found a partner. And in that moment, you don't take that decision on your own. And the experience, my experience, I'm more than 20 years in the business. My experience of selling wooden hybrid buildings was 0. And the investor's experience of purchasing wooden hybrid buildings was 0. And the experience of banks financing these kind of buildings was 0. Not to mention the tenant who never rented a wooden hybrid building. And we're not talking about laboratory, 2,000 square meters somewhere to test it. We're talking about 30,000 square meters. And everybody who's listening now, who is on the more commercial end of things, can easily calculate what this kind of project in today's market, which value or which costs are linked to this. And if your bank flips off or your investor flips off, as a developer, you might have a problem. And that was then the reason back then. And we're talking about end of 2017, early 18, right, Anya? So
Yes.
that's more than it's close to 5 years.
Yeah.
Or 4 years, sorry, to be precise. And maybe today, we talk about it now, these talks have not been there 4 years ago. They have not been there last year, so.
I mean, I clearly remember that we were also asked to present in front of your investor and present and even invite the tenant here, so to help convincing them that this is a good thing to do. And I mean, we face this challenge all the time, or lots of our clients face the challenge. The bigger the buildings become, and we would like to implement large volume buildings, the bigger the hesitation might be if they are not familiar with the subject. And of course, we always try to help convincing them. How was that in your case? Did that kind of turn the pages and then they made a decision after that, or was it just a side note that they saw, okay, at least here where I'm sitting, it works, and they did a good presentation? I mean, Hubert Romberg, the founder of CREE himself, presented in front of the investor, I believe, as far as I remember. What was the reaction on that? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Martin.
Sorry. Mentioning the say commercial stakeholders in such a project, so the tenant or the tenants and the investor and the bank, it was a bit different between the three. The tenant signed because of the wooden hybrid, and because of Edge being a developer that takes care of the people working in buildings, the well-being aspect, sustainability in general, beyond, or not beyond, but maybe before wooden hybrid buildings. So we were in a good position in that race for the tenant, because there was a competition out in Berlin, a big tender. All developers pitched for this tenant. And I think for the tenant, it was the final shot then to say, look, this is exactly what we need. I think the investor we discussed, it needed convincing. But at the end, they also are, smart blokes, and they said, that's maybe the future, building other stuff than only always the concrete. So we took them along, and for a bank or the bank, it was also quite difficult, because all the experts, and that is something we might touch later in the talk, every expert that is usually part of a project in such a project, planners, banks, evaluators, you name it, they have never executed such a project. So everybody starts kind of at zero. And also somebody who tells the bank, we could give that financing or this financing. There is no library. They cannot, dig in and say, we had that case, let's look it up. No, there is nothing to look up.
After having the experience of the Suedkreuz project now, do you think there's a different process required for systemized building for timber hybrid?
Yes, there is. We had to learn, or you tried to teach us, and we learned that we need to be ready with the planning before we start building. So if you build in a prefabricated way, it's very logical that when the walls and the ceilings are being fabricated, that the planning has to be ready by then. So in other projects, we sometimes finish what we call the LP5 in Germany. That's like the specification planning, you can call it. We kind of finalize it while we are already working on the excavation pit. But this is not possible in this prefabrication process. If you do it the right way, during the excavation pit, the walls should be fabricated in the warehouse. So, which means before you start with the excavation pit, you should be ready with the complete planning of the LP5. And that's when the whole prefabrication process and the modular process works. works in a good way. If you're not ready, then it gets a little bit messy. So this needs to be learned. It's a different kind of rhythm in the planning process, and also it doesn't give so many possibilities to make changes after the LP5, because then you might not see the process on the construction pit yet, but the elements are being fabricated already. So.
And that is, of course, a bit theory, unfortunately. In a good moment, you wouldn't have a tenant in that respect. But the biggest desire of a developer, of an office developer, is to have the tenant as early as possible, because that takes risk, commercial risk at least, or financial risk out of your project in terms of, can I finance this project? Can I really start construction? Do I have a product for the investors? But that is kind of paradoxon. You wish that there was nobody who's asking anything, no wishes, because usually the tendency is also not to say no to tenants' wishes, because the tenant pays the bill somehow. But purely procedure-wise, and that was your question, it would be super perfect world. The developer knows exactly what to build, then comes to CREE or to, unfortunately, maybe other parties. Presents that, then there will be, of course, value engineering, because you will not have designed everything perfectly. You can improve the design and optimize the design, and then you go. But that's not real life, and I doubt that this will be real life. So we will have to move on both sides from our end, learning from this project, also learning with whom to work, how the setup of the team. You need to embed the checking, testing engineers, the Brandschutzprüfer and static construction engineers, the one who actually approve that you really can go on site. They have never built such a thing, never. When, where, and guess what happened? They think, oh, that's interesting, that change. I might reconsider to calculate the building again, and again, and again. And that is something that take them on board as early as possible. They need to want that, of course, because they're, of course, the guys with the green stamp. But I think there's a lot to gain if you set it up perfectly. Then you will still encounter challenges, but it will be not such a bumpy road as we encountered in this project.
There's a question from the audience from Jack Crocker. So Martin, can you talk more specifically about the concerns that the financial lender had beyond it just being the first building of its kind?
Yeah, they were actually totally unsure how to evaluate that. Usually an office building, the formula is pretty easy. Rent times cap rate, or rent times yield, or rent times factor. Yeah, but which factor? Is it the same factor or the same yield as a standard building would give? Is it the same lifespan? Is the maintenance cost the same for the investor over 30 years or whatever time frame, and depending on the models that they use? And guess what happens? If people don't know, and it's not their fault, because we're starting a real new product, what do? They put in buffers in their calculations, as you would do if you offer a product to a developer where the developer doesn't know what he actually wants to order. What do? You give a bandwidth. And if this happens with financing, your LTC, that's in this case the loan to cost or loan to value, really moves down, which is for a developer really bad news, because everything that is not covered by the bank need to be covered by equity. Yes, we are a strong developer, but we're also, I said before, in Germany we have 1 billion in the pipeline. In total, we have 2.5 all of Europe, and we're privately owned, and that sees its limits pretty quickly at some point. And so that was quite a challenge. To be honest, we found a good bank. I'm happy to mention Hessische Landesbank here, Helaba, who was a partner before in other projects and who went down this road with us also in bumpier moments, and I think their learning curve was as steep as ours.
What
I
have
hope
you
that answered the question.
what have you done to convince them, or were they just convinced because they know that Edge always handles everything in a proper way, and that you are always on top of what you're doing? Or have you used some arguments that might have calmed them a bit on the development?
Yeah, I think that is the starting point. You know, if a bank or an investor, I think that counts for the same. All the tenant would lose the trust in the developer that they cannot deliver. Then you have a problem that it's hard to overcome with smart arguments about sustainability and whatever you can think of. No, I think that comes along, but it was it was a time where my thoughts were actually only around that field. I really had to, what happens is you have to give more guarantees. Really, black and white. The guarantees X. I think we rather want to have 2X from you. That again goes against your equity. But the worst case would have been that the bank jumps off. And then in the middle of construction, in a 100 million plus project, easily, that can be really tricky. And that shouldn't happen to live innovation and to ambitious projects.
There's another question from the audience, from Milos Haleka. What was the opinions of insurance companies?
I guess this goes for building insurance in terms of damages, fire, things that could happen during the construction.
I think so, yeah.
During the construction period. Anya, do you want to take that, or I can?
Yeah, I can just maybe add that they had some concerns about fire safety on the construction pit, and we had some. They asked for some special measures on the construction side, so nobody allowed to smoke, obviously. They received updates from us. We walked them around the construction site. So no unsolvable problems, I would say. No,
exactly. The good thing with wooden hybrid building is that you don't have a big stock of wood lying around in your site. And that's interesting to see the movie after the construction will be finished. We will, I think, produce a movie how that went up. And you see lorries coming in, you see them unloaded, you see exactly in that moment the stuff mounted in the position where it should finally be. So there's not a big warehousing situation for whatever materials. And I think there are a lot of people mentioned and commented when they visited the site that this is one of the most cleanest construction sites that they've ever seen, and not too many people, because all the constructors who on a concrete site are then doing the reinforcement, which is really handcrafted work. It's a total different rhythm. There are troops who just mount the stuff that will be delivered from the lorry, like click with of course not only with 2 screws, but is a bit more. But you could really see them walking up the axis in the walls and then go. And if you looked on the side camera the other evening, then you say, wow, there's the next half of the next floor. Different building rhythm.
Back to insurances, do you know if Vattenfall faces higher fees for their building insurance? I believe that they need to take care of that.
I could ask Hans Röschner, who is obviously in here because he commented or said hello in the chat. I can only guess. I don't think that this is a higher premium, because the building itself, when it's finished and handed over, has to comply with the same regulations than any other building, in terms of fire protection, in terms of escape routes, in terms of whatever you can think of. So I would highly recommend that Vattenfall, if they are in trouble with their insurance, give us a call and we help them to persuade to bring down the fees.
Very good.
And maybe I can add also that talking to like the fire brigade in Berlin, they were very happy with this construction because in an open construction like this, where you can see the wood at the whole time, you can see if something is going wrong. Mm-hmm. But if it would be cladded and something would be behind another construction, then you would never know exactly whether there's maybe a small burning going on. And in this way, actually the fire brigade and all the fire safety engineers, everyone we encountered was very happy with building with wood.
Yeah,
Can I quote that? I quote that to Mr. Rush. He said he's not aware of any special issues for the tenant for Vattenfall regarding insuring this.
Good
building.
To know. Yeah. Good to know. Was there any technical challenges? I believe, and I know there were. So can you say a bit about those? It's probably also very interesting for the ones who going to use that in the future.
Well, maybe if we go in chronological order, then I would maybe repeat what we said before. I think I would focus on timber hybrid from the beginning. It's very valuable if you know exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. And it's very valuable when you can start on a white piece of paper and then create the perfect, efficient modular system for this bearing material. So this is probably lessons learned that we had. Any redesign of an existing planning would probably lead to inefficiency in some ways, probably. So a white piece of paper starting from the beginning would be lessons learned. What we learned. And then also the geometrics was kind of an issue for us because with this carré building, the atrium building, it kind of looks rectangular, but it actually isn't. So only one angle is rectangular. We were not allowed to build rectangular for city planning reasons and restrictions, but it's very helpful if you have a plot where you can build in a rectangular way. I think we talked about this in a very, very early stage, Michael and Rainer, and you said we will manage. We did manage, but it's easier if it's rectangular. I think you would agree.
Yeah, that's definitely true, if I can step in here. And for us, it was also in the very beginning, we thought the main challenges will be the not rectangular shape of the building. But in the end, it turned out it's not a technical issue. It's just an issue of compensating the more efforts with additional formworks or something like this. So this wasn't a big challenge. Much more a challenge for us was the disturbances in the systems itself. Like we had in MK1, this steel construction, which was needed because the last 3 columns couldn't be placed because there were some cables and other infrastructure lying in the ground and we couldn't remove them. So to bring in this was even more effort in planning, in production, in logistics, and also in the assembly process. So this was a learning for us as well, that any bigger disturbances in the system are always quite a challenge. For sure, technical, everything is possible, but it's really a huge effort to fit something not fitting into a system.
Maybe a nice example, and that can happen to you because you can't oversee everything that happens in a project. Not sure that you referred to this moment. There was also very late in the process the need to embed a 2-story steel frame in the smaller building. You saw it maybe in the picture. The smaller building is located exactly at a junction, at a crossroads. And next to the site, we have one of the biggest train stations in Berlin, including a bus and transport hub. What they wanted to prevent is that a bus driver, white old man, look at me, 50, whatever, gets a heart attack 5 meters in front of that building, then steers the wheel and gets into the wooden hybrid building exactly on the corner. Because such a bumping load, I'm not sure that this is the right word, could have been an issue, let's put it this way. So the checking engineer said, no, this is not possible. You have to embed a massive steel frame. These kind of alterations, they are manageable, but they really cost you time. And they, of course, cost you money with regard to time and with regard to maybe other materials and redesign and stuff and etc. And that, will not kill you, but it can happen. And if that happens, you might lose the advantage you have in the speed of building such a modular building, maybe in that one go. Not sure how much that costed for us in time and money, but I remember that when I go around with visitors, they look at me, what's this? I said, then I have to tell that story. Make sure you think of all these things before to really stay in your system, in the modular system.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think there's a question regarding also the statics, when I can see that correctly here.
Mm-hmm. From Isaac.
Isaac is asking, Anya, you can take that. I know the answer, but whether the wood is load bearing or whether this is purely cladding or aesthetics.
I'm very proud to say that it is load bearing and it's not only aesthetics. Of course, the whole building is being carried by the wood, also by the concrete cores, but mainly by the wood. So there's no cladding at all in the building, I can say, except maybe in the atrium in the end where we're going to clad the trees. But in the normal office floors, the wood will be seen, will be visible by the tenants, can be felt, can be touched, and it's no cladding. It's the bearing structure.
You can see it. You can see it at Rainer's background picture.
It looks a bit like in my back. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Of course, the building has a weather protection from the outside. So we have a cladding from the outside, but for the tenants, for what they see and what they live in, is really a wooden building.
Exactly.
Maybe in that, what kind of feedback do you get for that? Having a load-bearing timber in the project, having timber visible everywhere.
So our tenants are going to move in December or January. So this is when we will hand over the project to the tenants. So they are not in there yet. But we just had a nice visit on site last week, 2 weeks ago. And I can say that whoever we go and visit the building with, the first thing they see and they are attracted by is the wood. They ask us whether the wood will stay the way it is right now or whether this is only the construction site atmosphere. And they're very happy when we say, no, the wood will stay and you will see it when you work here, you can feel it, and the wood will be the same the way you see it now. So they're very happy about the wood. They can smell the wood. They go and touch the wood, and I think they feel very comfortable with it. So we get only positive resonances for the wood. And I personally, and Martin said that before too, don't know anyone who doesn't want to work in a wooden environment.
I think we also have some pictures from last couple of days.
Yes, this would be nice to show. Mm-hmm. This is actually quite an old picture already. So, but you can see we are much further now. You can see the modular system and the wooden beams and the wooden pillars in the walls. I don't know if you want to show the picture from last week. This is how it looks now. So the floor is inside already, and the ceilings, the mechanical engineering is behind the white ceilings and between the wooden beams. This is kind of like the final state, how it will be when you work there.
some protection foils on it, but that's about it. Because we have to really make I could put 2 people on it. I could say we have tours through the building every week, sometimes more than once. Of course, the tenant Vattenfall is now visiting the building with management teams, but also with broad teams throughout the whole company, I think, which is very important and which seems to start and work really well. That's at least the feedback I get, or we get, because I think it's important. They come from, I think, at the end 5 locations into that building. So people have been working for years and maybe decades in a totally different area, atmosphere, and I think it's important also to take them along in terms of change management. Although we all believe that this is great, I think that is what it is. But still, people have their own opinions, and to make that Vorfreude, I'm not sure what this word in English is. People really want to work there. We need Vattenfall needs some multipliers, and they're doing that quite well now. I think in total there will be, I have no idea, 150 people who will have been visiting the building prior to the real moving in, and they talk to their people then in teams and in meetings and in town hall meetings and show the movie and really make that change happen.
Is there also interest by externals, by like maybe other potential clients of yours or other potential tenants of yours, or even competitors that would like to see what you have done there as definitely a first mover in Germany?
I have never had in my life of building real estate, mainly offices, such attention on a non-finished project. And it is everybody. Everything you mentioned is there. The competitors say, "Oh shit, what is that doing again?" Sorry for my English. But we are really open. I discussed this building, and I think Anya joined that call with our hardest competitor. If you could say that there is one big competitor, it's not. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of good development companies out there. But we're proud to share, and B, it's also needed that we share, because if we're the only one demanding these kind of products, the industry in total, beyond yourself, beyond CREE, will not deliver. Again, we still need to handcraft a lot of solutions around those wooden beams. The parts of the ceiling, part of where the insulation is behind. A lot of stuff, and if the industry gets on that track, then that helps again, because then you can look into your library and say, okay, I have that grid and that length of the beam and that width of the beam. I need this and that channel or whatever the product type is. Tenants, existing tenants, banking partners, of course the existing bank, but also others who want to do business with Edge. I think we had them all, and we keep on having them all. I think the most interesting, and I think, Anya, we can share that, the Komische Oper in Berlin, which is one of the 3 opera houses in Berlin, is thinking of a new building for decades, actually. It's a bit of a running gag in Berlin. And they rang us and said, "Hey, can we have a look?" We guided we guided the mayor of Berlin Mitte. Sorry, not the mayor, but the district councilor for construction and city and town planning. We guided them through the tour because they are building a new town hall in Mitte. So the angles from where people are interested in this building is really huge. And my team, Anya, is happy to do it, but the rest of the team nearly reads also to finish this building now. And they're shouting at me and saying, "Martin, can you please stop inviting all these parties?" But it's also my job to generate new business for Edge. And so I'm proud to show this project. Or we are.
That pretty much mirrors the experience we've got with other buildings as well, right? It brings up the question, I mean, you were the front runner of such a size in Germany, and you, as we have understood, you put a lot of effort and also money and energy in that. How do you think would that like monetize finally because of that attention that you get, maybe finding new clients or so?
I think if you would forget COVID for a moment and the effects that this could have for the office market, and we are, if you think of the total market, we are a small player. We are by now a well-known player, but we are small. How many projects do we do each year? New, two, three. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, I'm not worried at all that our product, gets affected by COVID effects, that people might reduce their building office space, because what every company needs is no matter how many office space or how much office space they still need, what they need is good office space. And then good can be defined differently, but I'm pretty convinced that we can offer a good office space. So in that respect, it will monetize, that we put this effort and this these work hours and longer working periods also, because it took a bit longer than we thought, unfortunately, that at some point will monetize, but it's hard to evaluate now how and when and in which dimension. At the end, it's also a lack of own capacity. Don't forget, now we are a company of 50 people in Germany. We are in total 120 all over Europe. Even if you know now exactly how to do it, I can't just hire 50 people and say, look, let's copy paste this project, including lessons learned, of course. That will not work. So there is a natural limit in what we can do. But again, we are happy to share this. And this is also a means here to participate, to share our learnings and our thoughts.
There had been a question about exactly this. What were the biggest challenges, the biggest lessons learned that you would want to apply on any future project?
I think our list is quite long of lessons learned, actually. I think we talked about some of them already. Maybe I can add one more lessons learned, and that's the consistent grid. I think Martin mentioned it a little bit, but we made a decision in this building. As you can see, we have 4 building wings, and since it's not a rectangular building, you can imagine that all those 4 building wings are slightly longer or shorter than the other one. And that makes it very difficult for a consistent grid. And we decided in the beginning of the project, for example, to have one consistent grid on every wing and not on every floor. And that is lessons learned. We learned that we didn't pay attention to the building, what do you call that, operations. Because when you're in prefabrication, the warehouse produces for the first floor, for the second floor, for the third floor, for the fourth floor. So they're not producing for the first wing and then the second wing and the third wing and the fourth wing, and they can't store so many modules. So you have to think in floors, and you have to think in building operations, how you choose the grid. And whenever you go away from a consistent grid, you have to think of building operations. That's a very big lessons learned that we did, and we would do much better next time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Without repeating, I'm thinking what we might have missed. I think we discussed the team setup. Of course, look for people who have experience there. It's always better to have a bit of experience than none. I think we discussed the process of planning and designing. Let's strive for that. Whether we can reach it, reality will prove. If the commercial people, and although I'm a trained construction engineer, I'm more commercial now in my life, and whenever I can have the chance to pick a tenant, I will. Nobody can stop me, so to say, but I know what the impact could be. Although Mr. Roche is listening, next time we will be stricter in terms of tenant wishes. There we made quite some mistakes. And it's hard to say no to a tenant, that's obvious. But the consequences of saying yes, which could be the right answer, we must have indicated much clearer. And that is something that I think is also valid for a non-wooden hybrid project. But here the consequences are much severe, and that is an experience we hadn't had. So I think there's a if you look into the details of all stakeholders and of the whole process, as Anya mentioned, the list is quite long, and it's not the one big thing that we should do differently. It's a lot of small things that then add up to a total picture, and we will not reach every item. You have to compromise in projects.
But finally, would you go for a timber hybrid system building again at some point?
Definitely.
And under what conditions? Like, what would be the ideal framework for that?
Well, first of all, for sustainability reasons, of course, yes. The framework would have to be that what we talked about before, we would kind of harvest from our lessons learned. We would do all those optimizations. I would expect that all the partners in the project share the same point of view and values, and that they see the necessity to go this way for sustainability reasons. I mean, it's always easier to build what we've been building for the last 30 years. That's always easier for every single one of us. But everybody needs to understand that we want to go this way and why we have to go this way. And I can see in this context, I could see those integrated contracts as a possibility, starting very early with the partners and sharing the risk of such a project. And as Martin mentioned before, I think for the next project, everybody will have gained experiences. We have gained experiences. The general contractor has gained experiences, but also all the planners have gained experience. So this was a pioneer project, and the next project will be much easier. Maybe not as easy as in 10 years, but I mean, we have to go this way. We're getting better and better by every project.
And would you then use the same supply chain? Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe quickly to add, I think that's important. The expectation is not that the whole market is now only building in wood. Let's be clear here. It is impossible from the resources, from the logistics, from a lot of things. Yeah, think of it. We have to really transport wood a couple of 100 kilometers to Berlin to apply it, because there is a bit of forest, but this little, maybe not little, but Tesla forest that needed to go for a different project just couldn't serve, or could not serve for such a project. It's just the wrong timber, the wrong wood. And I think, also there, when you think it bigger in terms of where to build these things in Germany, how to improve, you mentioned our Rainer supply chain. There are first developers who think of a manufacturing hall, so to say, themselves, that they put that on their side, to make sure that the capacities are there. I think somebody also asked about, if I saw that correctly, about pricing. I think current pricing situation has a lot to do with COVID, of stealing capacities that were already ordered somewhere else, and then somebody blocked the Suez Canal and the whole world logistics collapsed, and then somebody offered unfriendly, so to say, amounts of money, and then some deliverer said, okay, with this amount of money, I don't care about my old contract, I just sell it for another price. That will regulate itself again, I'm pretty sure. Don't ask me when. We were for this project here, we were done with that, because when it happened, we had already the topping out situation, so we didn't need to order any wood anymore. But of course, developers who are thinking currently about wooden hybrid might face, in the estimate, when they put the two options next to each other, might face a severe cost disadvantage, which in my world is not the real cost, apples to apples comparison between a concrete project and a wooden hybrid. It might be that it's a bit more expensive, but I would also say there it doesn't have to be more expensive, but the advantage lies in the quicker delivery. Yeah, and that's what we have to achieve. We have to achieve quicker delivery times. But then, because then your time to market, your readiness for tenants, for investors, for capital that wants to work, is so competitive in comparison to other developers, and so attractive for other corporates who want to rent your buildings. That's the big advantage, and I'm happy to pay a couple of % more construction costs if this is the outcome then.
Mm-hmm. I see. Maybe on my end, I would like to add on the material cost discussion, maybe some words on the motivation that drove us to develop the system was saving in material, and not only in concrete but also in wood. And it turns out now that we use about only 1/4 of the wood that you would use if you would build a building entirely of wood, which some people promote. Yeah? There's a lot of initiatives who say we need to build all wood, but then you exactly face those challenges even harder that the comment before mentioned.
There had been a few more comments with regards to sustainability. Does the modular timber approach allow for cradle-to-cradle life cycle, so the timber structure can be reused in some fashion after dismantling?
Yes, of course. It can be reused, and the life cycle of the embodied carbon within the wood can be even prolonged after. Maybe this building will be there for 100 years, and then in 100 years somebody comes and prolongs this life cycle for another 100 years. You can build a smaller building out of those beams, or you can create a different material out of these beams and pillars. The only thing you shouldn't do is burn the wood and release the carbon into the air. So this is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and maybe also good to mention, Anya, that this project is our pilot project in the Madasta system, where we are a Kennedy ambassador, you could say, of. There it's about material passport, really knowing what you put into buildings, to be able to reuse it, which is then the cradle-to-cradle angle, but also in terms of valuation. Maybe you know that valuation of buildings is more a commercial and financial exercise. That usually never reflects the real value of material used for buildings. Because if the tenant is out and the building is empty, there is no cash flow, so the value of the building is zero, which is, of course, bullshit. Especially if you can prove what you built in 30 years ago, 50, 100 years ago. And that will change evaluation of investment, and that will change evaluation of credit and loan and funding and financing. And that's an interesting not loop but link, because sometimes these two levels, or what is it, they are dislinked, because one thing is more the financial end of the whole cycle, and the other one is the real building. And with that idea, we will link the two loops, and then it gets real, so to say.
And I mean, we of course deeply believe that the building will be in use for more than 100 years because of the flexible floor plan and because of the just better indoor environment. I mean, if you remember, a lot of buildings, they get just out of fashion because people don't feel comfortable in them anymore. Maybe because of the floor plan, but also maybe because of the materials have been used. And we believe that wood is such a long-lasting material, also in terms of how people perceive it. I mean, you can see this all the way in all over the world, right? That people in timber buildings, they just like to live there. So that's also some of our motivation why we think that those buildings last for a much longer time, also in use.
There's one last question from the audience. Will this project be pursuing LEED certification?
Yes, it will be pursuing the German equivalent, the DGNB certification, and we will receive the platinum certificate for this building with a very high score.
I was going to say,
Congrats.
without revealing what we don't know yet ourselves, it will be a very high score.
Mm-hmm.
And we're aiming for the record.
Great to
I
hear.
think there's no. That's at this moment. It was not when we started it. Nothing to do with a race or a competition. But there is a record in DGNB Platinum for commercial buildings. Funny enough, we had that record ourselves for quite a time. With another building we finished 6 years ago, non-wooden hybrid, but some other qualities. Let's see.
And how about WELL? I think you also have engaged with WELL, which has been developed by LEED, I believe, by the US Green Building Council, I thought.
We are aiming also for the World Certificate in gold, which is proving that the well-being and the health in this building is on a very high level. Yes.
Good to hear. Congrats for that.
There was another question just popping up. What incentives do you see as a developer building sustainable? Is there anything coming from the ESG taxonomy that drives more sustainable building projects?
Yeah, no doubt. I think this ESG abbreviation that is in on everybody's desk now, to me, I think I mentioned that before, is nothing else than sustainability. Because we had always the ecological sustainability approach, we always had the social approach, and we all should have had the economical part. The only thing that is added here is the governance part. That is what especially taxonomy and reporting needs to investors is driving, especially the KPIs on that side. In the financial market, that is pretty proven already, so it's nothing new. But for the real estate industry, it's like ESG is coming all over us. So for us, that's a given. And I think what we will see, maybe it is the pressure that is needed, that more people don't only treat sustainability as a hobby or as an intrinsic motivation, but they need to pursue it. Otherwise, they will be in trouble to get financing, for instance. And they might get in trouble to sell their projects to end investors, and they might get in trouble to leasing out buildings. And if you miss one of those three or all three, then everybody knows what that means for projects.
And they also need to prove it with data and numbers. It's not only nice stories and anecdotes. It needs to be data.
That's quite a challenge because let's put it black and white. Nobody has these data at the moment. Nobody knows how much carbon is embodied in their buildings. Nobody knows that. But that's good because it's an important challenge and really fits to what Anya mentioned, introducing herself and our company. We really deeply believe that we really need to build better buildings, at least in the new build, to put our contribution there. The music plays in the existing stock. So we need quite some solutions for the existing buildings to improve what we have already built, because that's consuming the most of the energy. New products can be much better from scratch, of course.
But then it's even better to know that new built buildings won't bother us for quite some time, so that we can leave them and they sit there and don't do any harm, while we might focus on a bit more of the building stock.
We will do both. We have to do both.
Unfortunately, we have come to an end. And there was a nice final statement, and my last question would have been, how do you see the future of using timber in buildings? And if anyone would like to add something here, please feel free.
Keep
Ladies
on going.
first this time.
Well, I see a great future, because I see that we have to take every possibility we have to build in this sustainable way without a lot of CO2 emissions. And in this bearing structure, we have the chance now to do it. Within the MEP, we don't have it so much yet. We have to work on that. but especially on the bearing structure, we have the possibility, and I think we should use it as much as possible. Not for every building, but for the building and the plots that suit this structure.
Michael?
Yeah, from my side, I think it's not only about the wood in the load-bearing structure, but it's also in the fit-out materials. We have to keep an eye on that as well. And as Sonia already said, also in the fit-out of the mechanical services, there is a lot of things to improve. And I think wood is a good basic for the structural elements, not only for the structural elements, but for the fit-out parts as well. I'm aware that it doesn't fit into any urban surrounding to have a completely fit-out in wood, but I think there will be some new possibilities in the future as well to build with more sustainable materials in the fit-out as well.
So maybe I can do the second last comment, because I disagree a bit with Martin on where timber can be used. That's why I would like to leave you the last word with this. So my opinion on that is, what we have developed lends itself to the use, at least partially, in literally any kind of building on the planet. That's what we believe. Not every component, but at least some structural component can always be, like the primary or the secondary system, like roofs or floors. We have proven that in other countries already. And the forest, the tree stock is definitely there. That is proven, even or especially because we don't consume that much like other building typologies. That's why we think that there's definitely the potential to cover a wider range of the market and of building typologies and countries on the planet. Yeah, that's our belief.
I don't think we disagree here.
Okay.
Because I think the black and white comment I made before is more, will we as Edge and every other developer, once convinced, so to say, only go for wood? No, we will not. You know, we decided actively, maybe because we hadn't had the lessons learned, but also, you know, it could be an easy construction engineering problem because you have a building like the one we built in Hamburg for the same tenant, for Vattenfall. There's a rectangular building, so nicely shaped, enough space, you could perfectly do it. But at one angle, there's a tower coming out, and of course, you've proven that you are building towers. In that competitive situation, 1.5 years ago, we came to the conclusion that we lose one floor. And in that moment, where you don't have, say, not too much time to really assess, you have to take a decision. And then we chose for a concrete, for slim floor concrete construction method that also has not been used too often. Not sure how often. Also, they're innovative. You know, also they're saving CO2 embodied, not on the level like we do it here. But I think that's also our job to innovate in all directions. And I'm more than happy to keep on innovating in the wooden hybrid direction. And so I think there's a bright future for this method.
That's good.
Thank you so much. I'm going to close the discussion now. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for sharing lessons learned. This was super interesting, and hope to talk to you soon.
It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Yes.
Take care and
thanks.
Good luck for the next projects.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All the best. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.